Right after the funeral, while everyone was still in black standing around the casket, my mother leaned close to my ear and whispered coldly, "Don't expect to see your name in the will. Everything will go to Melissa." I thought I misheard, until she turned away, gripping my sister's hand like a victor. And at that very moment, inside my grandmother's old coat, I found a small key with strange engravings. It was tiny enough to fit in my palm, but when the light hit it, the carved lines glowed like a secret code. No one noticed what I held, no one cared. The whole family was busy discussing fair division, while all I could hear was my heartbeat pounding in my ears. If my mother was right, then why would Grandma secretly leave me a key? Why not Melissa, the perfect granddaughter the family always favored? That little key, seemingly meaningless, suddenly became the greatest mystery of my life. It didn't simply open a lock. It might open the truth that had been buried for years, the one my family tried so hard to hide. But where would it lead me? And why did Grandma choose me to carry it? The answer was still waiting ahead. I still remember clearly that autumn morning when I was 6. My mother walked Melissa into the private school with its polished sign, while I stood outside the fence waiting for the rattling city bus to take me to public school. The private school had green playing fields and carpeted classrooms, while my public school had peeling walls, broken desks, and no working heat in the winters. Every time I asked, "Why can't I study at Preston like Melissa?" my mother would simply answer, "You're more independent, Rose. You don't need those things." Independent. That was the word they used to justify neglect. Each time I heard it, it felt like swallowing an ice-cold stone, impossible to digest, impossible to spit out. When I was 12, my father bought Melissa an imported Italian violin worth months of his salary. They even hired a private tutor 3 times a week, filling the living room with music and attention. I sat at the kitchen table, doing homework alone, trying to ignore the sharp notes. That night, when I held out my straight-A report card to my father, he barely glanced at it before turning to Melissa. "Did you finish practicing your concerto today?" I took the chair, the certificate slipping from my hand onto the cold tile floor. No one bent to pick it up. My 16th birthday passed in silence. I waited all day, thinking there might be at least a small cake or a simple wish. By evening, the only thing I saw was a picture my mother posted on Facebook. A wonderful shopping day with my beloved daughter, Melissa. They were both smiling, holding designer bags, champagne glasses sparkling in the background. It wasn't even Melissa's birthday, not anywhere near it. I sat in the dark room, lit a tiny candle stuck in a discount store cupcake. I blew out the candle alone. Silence answered. I once thought maybe they didn't mean to hurt me. Maybe they were simply careless. But as I grew older, I realized their favoritism wasn't accidental. It was a system, a family order where every light shone on Melissa, and I was always the shadow. The day I graduated high school as valedictorian, I invited my parents to the ceremony. They nodded vaguely, said they'd try. When I stepped on stage to accept my diploma, I looked down at the audience and saw an empty row where they should have been. Later I learned they had gone to Melissa's dress rehearsal for her dance recital. I went home, dropped the diploma on the table, pretending not to care. But Grandma Eleanor knew. She came to my little apartment with a tray of hot lasagna, set it down, and smiled. "My granddaughter, today I was the proudest audience you could have." I hugged her, tears soaking into the lavender scent of her sweater. She didn't say more, only stroked my hair, letting me cry like a child even, though I was 18. She was the only one who truly saw me. She asked about my robotics projects in the science club, listened when I talked about my library job, even tried learning some Excel formulas after I bragged I was studying accounting. Every word from her felt like sunlight slipping through a crack in the door. Once, when I blurted out, "Why do they love Melissa more?" she sighed, pulled me close, and whispered, "They don't love her more. They love the image they want to see in the mirror. Melissa is like a glittering reflection of their illusions. But you, Rose, you reflect the truth. And truth always makes people uncomfortable." I remembered every word. Her voice became a fragile armor that carried me through years of being overlooked without collapsing. While Melissa changed her major 6 times in college and still had full financial support. I worked 3 jobs to pay my tuition at the state school, early morning coffee runs, long evening shifts at the supermarket, weekends typing at the library. No matter how tired, I kept my grades up. When I finally held my honors accounting degree, I looked around the hall. My parents? Nowhere. They were in Cabo, taking pictures on the beach, celebrating Melissa's engagement to a man she had known for 3 months. That engagement fell apart after 4 months, but that never changed their perspective. To them, every failure of Melissa's was a learning experience, while every success of mine was expected. I learned to swallow small wounds, like thousands of cuts that never healed. But Grandma always appeared at the exact moment I was about to fall. When I earned my CPA license, she brought a frame, slipped the certificate inside, and hung it on the wall. "You're building something truly valuable, Rose. Others may not see it, but I do." She gathered every scrap of my victories, strung them together into the pride I never got from my parents. In her drawer, she kept my college essays, bragging at her book club, "My granddaughter is brilliant." Maybe that's why her Maple Street house became the only place I ever felt I belonged. The house smelled of apple pie baking in the small kitchen, had a wide porch where she and I read books on summer afternoons. There, I wasn't Melissa's shadow. I was Rose, the one who was heard, the one who was seen. And in that house she once tilted her head and whispered, "One day, you'll understand. What they call selfish is really the right you deserve to keep." At the time, I didn't think much of it. I held her hand, believing I still had one place, one person who would never abandon me. But I didn't know her words had already planted a seed for the storm to come. On the day the will was read, the atmosphere in the small conference room at the law office was suffocating. I sat at the far end of the table, hands clenched so tightly my nails dug into my skin. Leather chairs creaked as people shifted, pretending to relax in the heavy silence. My parents sat close together, their faces blank, but I saw the hunger in their eyes. Melissa sat across from me, her beige dress hugging her frame as if she were the star of the event, ready to accept a grand award. Attorney Mills, a petite middle-aged woman with sharp eyes, opened a black folder. Her voice was steady, each word echoing in the still air. "According to the legal will of Mrs. Eleanor Irving, prepared and certified 3 years ago, full ownership of the 3-bedroom house at 427 Maple Street, along with all property attached to the land, is hereby bequeathed to Rose Irving." The room burst into noise. Melissa slammed her purse on the table, eyes wide. "What? No way." My mother turned, face flushed red, fingers stabbing toward me. "This must be a mistake. She's been selfish since she was a child. There's no way my mother left everything to her." My father's palm cracked against the table, the sound hard and clean. "I demand to see the papers. This is betrayal of the family." Each word hit me like an arrow to the chest, but I bit my lip and forced myself to stay calm. Attorney Mills didn't flinch. She turned the document toward them, tapping firmly on the final line. "This is Mrs. Eleanor's signature, with verification from 2 independent witnesses and a notary. The will is entirely valid." Melissa shrieked, her voice breaking. "That's not fair. I'm the one who needs that house. Rose already has a place to live." I almost laughed, but my throat closed up. The place she referred to was my tiny, mold-stained apartment, where I struggled each month to pay rent. Meanwhile, she lived in a luxury apartment, courtesy of our parents' amenities my paychecks had never reached. My mother slammed the table, leaning close to Attorney Mills. "I will not accept this." Rose deceived her grandmother. She planted the idea for Eleanor to write a biased will. I lifted my head, my voice shaky but clear. "Don't insult Grandma like that. She knew exactly what she was doing." The air tightened like a string pulled to breaking. For a moment I caught Attorney Mills's eyes softening, a flicker of silent encouragement. My father gave a dry, bitter laugh. "Rose, do you really think keeping that house will make you happy? Don't you feel ashamed for stealing your sister's chance?" I turned toward Melissa. She dabbed at fake tears, forcing out her familiar pitiful act. "You already have everything. You're strong, you're accomplished. But me, I only have that house. Why can't you let me have it? In that instant, memories rushed back every forgotten birthday. Every time I stood alone on stage without family in the audience. Every late night studying under a yellow lamp while they chauffeured Melissa to ballet. I drew a deep breath, steadying my tone. You've always had everything, Melissa. Always. This time, let Grandma decide. Attorney Mills closed the file and tapped the table lightly. The will is clear. If the family intends to appeal, the court will handle it. But I'll repeat, this document is legal and very difficult to challenge. My mother inhaled sharply, then turned to me, her voice hissing through clenched teeth. You will regret this, Rose. My father shot me an icy glare, then stood abruptly with my mother, pulling Melissa out with them. The door slammed shut, leaving behind a heavy silence. I sank into the chair, hands trembling. Attorney Mills studied me, then said softly, I know this is hard, but Eleanor was firm. She said, only Rose truly understands the value of that house. I bowed my head as tears slid down. Amid the chaos, my fingers brushed the small key in my pocket. Its strange engravings seemed to glow brighter under the fluorescent light. Grandma never did anything without meaning. The house was only the surface. That key surely opened something beyond my imagination. That night, back in my tiny apartment, I sat on the bed, turned on the desk lamp, and placed the key before me. Questions whirled. Where did it belong? What secret room in the Maple Street house had I never seen? And why did Grandma entrust it to me, knowing my family would resist? I had no answers. But one thing was certain. The storm in my family had only begun. And that small key, it was at the center of it. Just days after the will reading, my phone became a non-stop megaphone. Messages poured in from early morning until past midnight, never giving me space to breathe. Family means sharing. Grandma would be ashamed of you. Don't be so selfish, Rose. Your sister needs a fresh start, and you're already settled. The words repeated like a script, as if orchestrated. Each time I set my phone down, it buzzed again, sometimes from my mother, other times from an aunt I hadn't spoken to in years, or an uncle who only showed up at Christmas. They all hammered the same point. You must share. You can't keep everything to yourself. I remember one night vividly, the clock near 11, when my screen lit up with a call from Aunt Helen. I hesitated, then picked up. Her voice was thick with worry. Rose, I know you're upset, but you can't take this so far. The house is too big. How can you manage it alone? I closed my eyes, forcing calm. Aunt Helen, this was Grandma's decision. She left it to me. She sighed. But think of Melissa. She's fragile, sensitive. She'll break if she sees you holding on so tightly. I bit my lip, a lump rising in my throat. Melissa fragile? And what about me through all those years of neglect? Did anyone ever call me fragile? The next day, my father asked me to come over to talk like adults. I stepped into the familiar living room, where a long row of chairs had been arranged. Sitting there were aunts, uncles, relatives I had never been close to. Melissa sat in the center, eyes red, clutching tissues. My mother began, her tone slow but sharp. Rose, we're family. Family means sharing. You're breaking this bond. I drew a deep breath. I'm not breaking anything. I'm only keeping what Grandma gave me. Melissa lowered her head, her voice trembling. I'm not asking for everything. I only want fairness. We could sell the house, split it in half or in thirds. You don't need that much. An uncle chimed in, nodding. She's right. Rose, you already have a job. You can manage on your own. Melissa's starting out, she needs stable housing. I turned and met their eyes. Stable housing? She lives in a luxury apartment paid for by our parents, with a pool and a gym. And me? I'm in a moldy apartment, scraping together rent from my paycheck. Has anyone cared about my stability? The room froze for a beat. Then my mother cut in, snuffing out the silence. Rose, if you loved your family, you wouldn't ask such selfish questions. Under the table, I clenched. At my fists. Each word replayed my childhood whenever I spoke up. The answer was always selfish. The breaking point came that night. As I reached my apartment, a text arrived from my father. Just one line, but each word struck like a nail. Either sell the house and split, or you are no longer part of this family. My phone dropped to the floor, and I didn't bother to pick it up. In the small room, the hum of the old fridge blended with the pounding of my heart. I wasn't shocked by the ultimatum my whole life. I'd never truly been part of the family. But this time, they said it out loud, cold and final. I thought of Grandma Eleanor. Maybe she had foreseen this day, which was why she left me both the house and that mysterious key. The next day, I decided not to answer a single call. I left the ringer off, though messages kept flooding in. You're disappointing, Grandma. Don't let money destroy kinship. Melissa cried all night. She can't take this. I stood by the window, staring at the narrow street below my apartment. Cars passed, yellow lights stretched across the cracked pavement. In that moment, I knew I was at the edge. Either yield and remain part of the family, or stand firm to protect the last thing truly mine. But I also knew once my parents had pushed me this far, it wouldn't stop at messages and calls. They would go further. They would do whatever it took to break me. That night, I sat alone at my small kitchen table, yellow light falling over its scratched surface. My phone buzzed endlessly, texts from my mother, my father, even relatives whose faces I barely remembered. I switched the screen off, took a deep breath, but the weight in my chest stayed heavy. Then another alert sounded, a strange number. I opened it. I know Eleanor once discussed the contract with you. Meet me. Urgent. I had never heard Grandma mention any contract tied to the house. All I had was the will and the mysterious key hanging in my coat pocket. I typed back, "Who is this?" In less than a minute, the screen lit up. Marcus Hale. Surely you remember me. Marcus Hale. The name yanked me back to my college years. He had been my teammate in financial analysis class. Back then, we spent late nights in the library, sharing instant noodles, laughing about the future. I had chosen the steady path, while he had the bigger vision. I knew he'd succeeded, but not to this degree. Marcus was now the CEO of a fast-rising tech company in Silicon Valley. Ironically, the very company Melissa bragged about joining as a newly promoted marketing manager. My heart pounded. Why would Marcus know about my grandmother? And more than that, why did he mention a contract? I typed back slowly. Can you explain more? The message came through immediately. Not over the phone. Meet in person. Bring the key. I believe Eleanor wanted you to know the truth. I stared at the screen, my mind in turmoil. How did he know about the key? I had never told anyone. I shoved the phone into my pocket, reached for the key on the shelf. It rested in my palm, cold and solid, the strange engravings glinting under the light. A vague feeling stirred. Maybe this was the moment I had to find the answers. We agreed to meet at a small cafe in downtown Palo Alto. When I walked in, Marcus was already there, wearing a simple shirt but carrying the quiet confidence of someone used to leading hundreds of employees. He looked up, smiling as he used to, though his eyes were serious. "Rose, it's been a long time." I gripped my hot coffee cup tightly. "Marcus, how do you know about this? How do you know about my grandmother's key?" He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Because Eleanor once came to me." I froze. Marcus went on. 3 years ago, when my company was expanding, she met me through a mutual friend. She asked me about setting up an investment fund, and mentioned preparing a Talagis as that was expanding. Contract, to protect her granddaughter. I didn't know the details, but she was very firm. When I heard she had passed, I guessed sooner or later your family would pressure you. And here we are. So you texted me. For what? Marcus met my eyes. To tell you she never abandoned you. She prepared more than you realize. And I think that key is part of the rest. I set the key on the table. The metal glinted beneath the cafe light. Marcus picked it up, studied it closely, then nodded. This isn't a regular house key. This is a bank key for a safe deposit box. I exhaled sharply, my heartbeat racing. The pieces began to align. So, she had a safe deposit box? Marcus nodded. And inside, it could be the contract she mentioned. I know a branch manager at a local bank. If you agree, I'll go with you tomorrow. I stayed silent for a long time. In my head echoed my mother's voice, my father's, Melissa's fake sobs, and my father's final text: either sell the house or you're no longer family. I looked up at Marcus. Fine, tomorrow. The next morning, I slipped on a dark coat, tucked the key into the inner pocket, and drove to the meeting point. My phone buzzed nonstop along the way. I left it untouched. For the first time, I felt I didn't need to answer. Marcus was waiting outside the bank. He gave me an encouraging smile, then led me in. The branch manager, an older woman with a kind face, took the key from me, checked the records, then guided us down to the basement. I slid the key in, heard the click. The small door opened. Inside, the file was heavier than I expected. Tucked beneath the folder was a small envelope stamped Attic, Maple Street, and inside it, a brass key. My fingers trembled as I turned each yellowed page, the smell of old paper mixing with the metallic air of the bank's underground. The bold title burned into my eyes. Transfer contract. Eleanor Irving. Marcus pulled out a chair, motioning me to sit at the small table in the records room. He opened the file, reading slowly, his voice steady so I could follow every detail. This isn't an ordinary contract, Rose. Your grandmother prepared everything carefully. The first page was an agreement of sale for the Maple Street house. Seller, Eleanor Irving. Buyer, Hale Properties LLC, a subsidiary of Marcus's company. Her signature appeared, shaky but clear, alongside a notary's seal from 3 years ago. I gripped the table edge, my heart pounding. You mean, Grandma was ready to sell the house to you? Marcus shook his head, calm. Not exactly. This was a conditional contract. It only takes effect if you choose to activate it. And more importantly, look at clause number 7. I leaned closer, scanning the bold lines. The seller agrees to transfer the above property to Hale Properties LLC at market value, determined at the time of transaction. The buyer agrees to immediately grant Rose Irving, granddaughter of Eleanor, a 10-year long-term lease at a preferential rate, and grants to Rose Irving an irrevocable 10-year call option to repurchase the property at the fixed price stated herein, exercisable at Rose's sole discretion. Each word jolted through me like electricity. Grandma hadn't only left me the house. She had built a legal shield, so even if my family overturned the will, I would still have an unshakable claim. Marcus tilted his head, voice dropping. She saw further than any of us. She knew one day they'd turn against you. I closed the file, pressing my hands to my forehead. Images of her came rushing back, her gentle smile, her whispers whenever I felt lost. She had been preparing me all along. But why you? I lifted my head, eyes wet. Why did she choose your company as the buyer? Marcus shrugged, though his gaze held no surprise. She came to me, Rose. Maybe because she remembered I was your classmate and trusted I'd respect her wishes. She told me plainly, I want to deal with someone outside the family, but who will protect my granddaughter at all costs. The bank vault seemed to close in around me. Amid all the chaos and betrayal of my family, a thin beam of light broke through. She had chosen well. Marcus leaned forward, his tone firm. The choice is yours. This contract hasn't been activated. If you want, we can finalize it within days. If not, it'll be sealed again. But I warn you, don't underestimate your family's force. I know people like them. I let out a brittle laugh. Yeah. I know people like them too, Marcus. If I agree, I hesitated legally, the house would belong to your company. Marcus nodded. Correct. But you'd still be the only one living there, preserving its space and memories. No one could force you out, and more importantly, you'd hold the right to buy it back anytime at the same price. Your family couldn't interfere. I leaned back, closing my eyes. In my mind rang my father's shout. Either sell the house and split, or you're no longer family. My mother's sneer. You're selfish. Rose. And Melissa's fake tears demanding fairness. Then maybe it's time I follow the plan Grandma left for me. Marcus didn't smile, but his eyes lit with agreement. He folded the file into a leather case, then stood. We'll keep everything transparent, Rose. When the time comes, you'll need certainty. I clutched the key in my hand. As we walked out of the bank's basement, daylight hit my eyes, blinding. I squinted, but inside I felt brighter than ever. That same day, I entered Attorney Mills's office with more calm than I'd ever carried before. She gave me a subtle nod as I arrived. The warm yellow lights in the room didn't ease the tension waiting there. My parents sat on the far side of the dark wood table, faces stiff. Melissa leaned to one side, posture meek, but her red eyes angled toward everyone, and to highlight her pain. Beside them sat a stranger, a woman with blazing red-dyed hair in a sharp crimson suit, with a stack of files and contracts spread before her. I knew instantly she was a real estate broker. My mother spoke first, her voice raspy but commanding. Rose, we're not here today to fight. We're here to resolve this fairly. My father nodded, glancing at Mills before fixing on me. The Maple Street house must be sold. This isn't personal. This is family business. I sat down, placing both hands squarely on the table. The broker pushed the file toward me, her smile strained but her eyes cold. I already have 3 offers above market price. If you sign today, everyone here will have a substantial sum to begin a new chapter. Melissa carefully set down her tissue, her voice trembling. Sister, I only want fairness. I'm starting a new job. I need stable housing. My apartment is too small to host clients. By keeping it all, you're pushing me into hardship. I turned, locking eyes with her. My stare made Melissa shrink back, but immediately my mother cut in. Rose, you can't be so cold. You're destroying your sister's future. Every word out of their mouths repeated the same old script, except today they had an audience, Attorney Mills, and the broker eager to close the deal for her commission. My father slammed his hand on the table, his voice hissing. You need to understand. If you don't sell, you'll lose everything. Don't think the will is a shield. We can sue. We can prove the old woman was under undue influence. Attorney Mills cut in, her tone steady but firm. I witnessed Eleanor fully lucid when she signed. 2 doctors confirmed it. Your chances of appeal are virtually 0. My mother's face tightened as she turned to Mills. You say that because you're siding with Rose. But we're the family. We have the right to speak. I looked at each face, the fury in my father, the manipulation in my mother's tone, Melissa's fake watery eyes. They still believed they could control me like when I was a child, trembling under my father's glare. The broker leaned forward, eager. An opportunity like this doesn't come twice. If you wait, the market will shift, and you'll lose out. Sign now, Miss Rose. I let them keep talking, let them think I was cornered. In truth, every word only reminded me of the file in the safe deposit box the contract Grandma had prepared, a move they had no idea about. Melissa turned to me, this time forcing louder sobs. I don't want you out of the family. I want us to keep the peace. Sign it, and we'll be like before. Like before? I remembered the empty birthdays, the abandoned ceremonies. If that was before, why would I ever return? My father glanced at his watch, then lowered his voice, sharp as a blade. You have 5 minutes to decide. If not, you no longer have parents. They had played their last card. And I knew this was the moment to respond. I rose slowly, every eye fixed on me. I spoke evenly. If you want to know who the house belongs to, then come see for yourselves. The broker arched a brow. My father glared. My mother's mouth dropped open. Melissa clutched her tissue, staring at me with suspicion and fear. I grabbed my bag, turned, and headed for the door. Behind me, my father growled. What game are you playing, Rose? You'll see soon enough. The convoy of cars rolled down the tree-lined street toward Eleanor's house. I gripped the wheel, heartbeat steady like a drum in my chest. In the rearview mirror, my parents and Melissa sat in the car behind me, faces tight with anger and anticipation, as if victory were within reach. When we turned onto Maple Street, my eyes locked on the gleaming white Tesla parked by the porch. Afternoon sunlight flashed across the paint, making it stand out against the familiar backdrop. I knew instantly it was Marcus's car. He had arrived early, just as planned. I pulled over, drew a deep breath, and stepped out. Gravel crunched under my shoes, making my pulse skip. Behind me, my parents' car screeched to a stop. They rushed out, Melissa in the middle, her gaze wary as she spotted the Tesla. "Whose car is that?" my mother asked, her voice less certain now. My father snapped. "Probably a neighbor. Let's go inside." But as we climbed the porch steps, the front door swung open. Marcus appeared tall, in a plain shirt, carrying the quiet authority of a man long accustomed to power. In his hand was a thick file with a red cover stamped with a notary seal. Marcus looked at me, gave a slight nod, then turned to the others. "Hello, I'm Marcus Hale. I think it's time we had a clear conversation, right here." My father quickly recovered his sternness, stepping forward. "Who are you to stand at our door? This is our family property, not a place for you to intrude." Marcus smiled calmly, unshaken. He lifted the file, his voice precise, each word striking like a gavel. "I'm sorry, but you're mistaken. This house is now under my legal ownership. The sale contract was signed and filed with the court 3 days ago." I watched my father's face flush red, my mother whip her head toward me, eyes blazing. "Rose, what have you done?" I held her gaze, steady. "I've only exercised my legal rights." Melissa staggered back half a step, as though distance could change reality. She shook her head, whispering, "No, no way. He's my boss." Marcus turned to her, calm but cutting. "That's right, Melissa. And from now on, I expect professionalism at work. Family matters and company business must remain separate." His words, soft yet sharp, cut deeper than any scream. I saw Melissa's lips tremble, while my father roared, "This is a conspiracy. You two plotted this to deceive us." Just then, Attorney Mills stepped forward from behind, placing another file on the porch table with composure. "Everything is legal. I certified this transaction. There's nothing unlawful here." My mother cried out, her voice cracking, "My daughter was manipulated. She was forced." Marcus cut in firmly, his voice echoing, "Eleanor prepared this contract years ago. She knew exactly what she wanted. Rose wasn't coerced. This was her grandmother's will, and now it's legal fact." I looked at the scene before me, my father staggering with rage, my mother screaming in futility, Melissa frozen like stone. And I remembered Grandma's words, "When the truth comes out, you'll see them as they truly are." Marcus flipped to the first page of the file, holding it up. "Here's the updated deed with my name. You can check it online anytime." Silence fell across the yard. Neighbors began gathering at the gate, whispering, watching like it was a live drama. I caught sight of Mrs. Kim across the street, coffee in hand, nodding as though she were watching a TV series unfold. Melissa turned to me, stripped of her usual theatrics. This was real fear. "What have you done?" "He's my boss. How can I face work tomorrow?" I answered slowly, each word deliberate. "You should have thought about yesterday, when you and our parents tried to take what wasn't yours." Marcus closed the file, his voice dropping like a verdict. "As of today, the Maple Street house no longer belongs to the Irving family. It belongs to me, and the agreement is sealed." Melissa collapsed onto the porch steps, hands covering her face. My father stood in stunned silence, my mother muttering, "Impossible," like someone lost. The tension hung thick until Marcus cleared his throat, drawing eyes toward the group of employees stepping out of the parked company cars. They carried blueprints, laptops, file boxes, uniformed, professional, efficient. Marcus faced my family, his voice strong. "I'll be brief. My company has. I've chosen to open a satellite office for the marketing department here. You've seen the contract, the ownership is mine. But I'm not here to strip this place of its soul. I want to keep the spirit of the house, to turn it into a creative hub." Melissa's face drained of color as Marcus stopped, fixing his eyes on her. "Melissa, your department will be working here. Starting next week, all team meetings, brainstorming, and client sessions will be held at Maple Street." The words crashed like thunder. My mother gasped, "No, this can't be." Melissa shook her head furiously. "What are you saying? This, this was my grandmother's home. I can't work here. Not with. She darted a glare at me, her eyes torn between hatred and panic. Marcus stayed composed, replying, I don't care whose home it used to be. It's now company property. You're an employee, and you'll follow assignments. If this doesn't suit you, you may request a transfer. But let me be clear. Refusing to work here will be considered insubordination. Melissa opened her mouth to protest, but froze under Marcus's cold stare. Her shoulders trembled. My parents stared at each other, speechless. Marcus then turned to me, his expression softening. And Rose, the buyback clause Eleanor left is in force. You hold an irrevocable 10-year option to repurchase this house at the fixed price. Though he had already told me this at the bank, hearing him announce it in front of my family hit like a wave flooding my chest. My mother cried out, almost shrieking, No, that's not fair. Attorney Mills interjected coolly, her voice firm. Everything has been signed, notarized, and filed with the court. It's fully legal. My father clenched his fists, veins bulging. You're destroying my family. Marcus raised a brow. Or maybe your family is destroying itself in front of everyone. The neighbors at the gate murmured louder, some even filming. I spotted Mrs. Kim again, still, nodding like she couldn't believe the show playing out across the street. Melissa stepped forward shakily, pleading at Marcus. You can't make me work here. This is hell for me. Marcus kept a polite smile, but his eyes held no room for negotiation. This isn't hell. This is an office. And it's where you'll have to prove your ability through work, not favoritism. My mother turned to me, her voice breaking. You planned this from the beginning, didn't you? You and Marcus. You plotted to ruin your sister. I answered slowly, each word clear. No one ruined anyone. I only carried out what Grandma wanted. This house is the legacy she left me, not something for others to seize. Melissa's arms dropped as she slumped onto the steps, her eyes hollow. For the first time, the constant arrogance in her was completely gone. Marcus signaled the employees to start unloading boxes. They carried in desks, swivel chairs, whiteboards. The house began shifting before my eyes into a modern workspace. I felt the pull between past and present, between Grandma's memory and the future unfolding. One of Melissa's colleagues, Jennifer Wu, the head of marketing, was among them. She came over and shook my hand politely. Rose, I'm glad to know you'll be living upstairs. It's wonderful the new office can keep the warmth of family, I answered, awkward but sincere. I hope so too. Jennifer turned to Melissa, her tone firm. Melissa, starting next week, our team will be working here. I expect your cooperation. And don't forget, this is your chance to prove your ability. Melissa said nothing, keeping her head down. My parents exchanged glances, then both stood abruptly. My father spoke, voice thick with anger. Let's go. This is no longer our home. My mother clutched his hand, but before turning away, she threw me a glare sharp as a knife. Rose, you will pay for this. I clenched the key in my pocket, feeling each cold groove press into my skin. In that moment, I knew the counter-strike had succeeded twice over. Melissa not only lost her chance to take the house, but was forced to work inside it. Facing daily the truth that I, the sister once dismissed, now held the final say. And with the buyback clause secured, I knew the house, Grandma's legacy, had never slipped from my grasp. The following months passed like a quiet test where I didn't need to act, only watch. The Maple Street house was both my home and Marcus's satellite office. By day, the downstairs buzzed with marketing staff, laptop screens glowing, keyboards tapping, strategy debates echoing. Upstairs, I lived peacefully, as though nothing had changed. But this peace wasn't by accident. It was the outcome of storms finally settling. Melissa was different. I saw her every morning at 9, dragging herself from her car with dark circles under her eyes. No more designer dresses or luxury handbags, only standard office wear, makeup unable to hide her fatigue. She passed my door daily, never greeting, never looking up, as if even glancing at me would suffocate her. Jennifer Wu once whispered to me in the garden, I gave Melissa a chance, but she hasn't delivered. Her latest report was full of errors, her ideas stale. Without anyone covering for her, the cracks are showing. 3 months later, word spread. Melissa was placed on a performance watch list. The company murmured, gossiped. An employee once the boss's favorite was now scrutinized by the hour, by every report. Marcus didn't intervene, he let the process play out like it would for anyone. One afternoon, as I watered Grandma's rose bushes, I heard sobbing from the porch. Melissa sat hunched, clutching her phone, her voice breaking. Sister, they fired me. I lowered the watering can, looking down at her. Mascara streaked across her face. In that moment, I no longer saw the arrogant girl once paraded by our parents, but someone lost, never having, stood on her own feet. What will you do next? I asked, without reproach. She shook her head, choking. I don't know. I've never had to take care of myself. Maybe it was the first honest conversation we ever had, no facade, no drama. But I knew the path ahead was hers, not mine. Meanwhile, my parents shrank further into themselves. Neighbors whispered nonstop. The Irvings were so proud, look at them now. My mother endured stares at the market. My father, once proud of his community standing, now walked with his head lowered. One day, I saw a for sale sign in front of their house. Rumors spread quickly. They planned to move to Arizona to start over where no one knew the story. I wasn't surprised. Running away had always been their way when reality turned against them. I didn't see them off. I only heard from Mrs. Kim across the street. They're gone. Probably not coming back. That evening, I sat alone in Grandma's living room. The yellow lamp cast light over her smiling portrait. I poured myself tea, sat in her old armchair. The house was quiet, only wind rustling the garden outside. Peace, at last, held. No more accusatory texts, no heavy phone calls, no staged interventions under the guise of family. I opened the window, letting the scent of roses drift in. Her image filled my mind, her warm hand on my shoulder, her steady voice. They dismiss you because you reflect the truth. Don't be afraid. One day, the truth will protect you. And today, I was living inside that truth. Each morning, I brewed coffee and opened the window to the garden where she had taught me patience. Each night, I worked upstairs with ease, breathing freely, dreaming of a future finally mine. That peace wasn't given. It was earned through every moment I refused to yield, every choice to keep her legacy as she intended. One weekend afternoon, sunlight slanted through the attic window as I decided to clean the storage. A room full of old belongings Eleanor had tucked away. The room smelled of damp wood, worn fabric, faint lavender fading with years. Each item stirred memories. A wooden clock long stopped, magazines from the 80s, a box of yarn she once used to knit me winter scarves. I dusted, opening drawers one by one. Some made me smile, others stung my eyes. And then, in the last drawer, hidden behind folded tablecloths, I found a small wooden box, its lock rusted but intact. I carried it to the living room, placed it on the table. The small brass key from the envelope in the deposit box fit perfectly. A quiet click. I held my breath, turned the key. Inside wasn't jewelry or deeds, but a bundle of old letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. My hands shook as I untied it, the scent of aged paper rising like a breath of the past. I opened the first letter. Her familiar handwriting, steady and deliberate. My dear Rose, if you find these letters, it means I'm no longer with you. I know they will try to take everything. They will call you selfish, ungrateful, disloyal. But remember, when they try to extinguish you, the flame still burns. Don't fear keeping what is yours. Because you are not only keeping it for yourself, but for the truth. With love, Grandma. I set the letter down, my hands trembling. My throat tightened, tears falling onto the page, blurring the old ink. I opened another. Rose, I know you feel abandoned. Silent birthdays, ceremonies without your parents. But understand, that silence doesn't diminish you. It makes you stronger. Let them live in illusions. You live in truth. And truth will guard you. Another read, My Rose, if someday you face a hard choice, remember, legacy is not a house. It is your right to live true to your value. The house is only a tool to keep that right. That's why I prepared everything, so you would never be forced to surrender. Trust my plan. I see you, always. I sat still, letters spread before me. Each line pieced together fragments of memory. Everything had been in her design, from the secret contract with Marcus, to the key, to the lease and buyback clause. She had mapped my way so I would never be cornered. I folded a letter, pressed it to my chest. It felt as if she were still there, watching with kind eyes. That night I arranged all the letters in a small glass box, placed on my office shelf. Each morning when I sat at my desk, I saw them as a reminder. I was never alone. The next day, when Marcus stopped by to check on the downstairs office, I told him about the box of letters. He listened quietly, then said slowly, "Your grandmother must have been extraordinary. She didn't leave me a house. She left me the belief that I have the right to live true to myself." Marcus looked at me, his eyes both respectful and warm. "And you're doing exactly that." That evening, I sat on the porch, wind rustling the roses. Peace spread through me, as if I had finally reached the root of everything. She had always seen me, even when the world turned away. I no longer needed recognition from my parents or anyone else. Everything I needed was here. Some people are born cradled by their families. Others, like me, must take each unsteady step to hold on to what is rightfully theirs. But perhaps those steps are what teach us the meaning of true worth. And what about you? If you were in my place, called selfish for keeping your rightful inheritance, would you yield for the sake of peace, or stand firm as my grandmother urged? Don't fear keeping what's yours. I truly want to hear your thoughts, because every family story carries its own truths. If this story touched you, leave a comment below. And don't forget to follow the channel to join me for more stories where every life, every choice, every family secret reveals lessons about kinship and self-worth. Because sometimes, what makes us strong isn't the crowd's noise, but the moment we dare to say, "Enough. This is my life.